Welcome, guys. This is RJ Bell from pregame.com talking Brett Favre betting odds with the Minnesota Vikings for 2010. Now, we could be talking about this in 2009, 2008, but it's 2010. Let's make sure we know that so we don't have any dated material. Now, we're going to talk about some of the more prevalent odds out there, and then we're going to dig a little deeper into some betting concepts with futures. Okay, so right now, there's a wide range of odds after his official announcement. I've seen odds as bad or as low as 8 to 1 for Minnesota to win the Super Bowl. And I've seen them as high as 15 to 1. And it really speaks to the lesson, which is you want to shop hard for future bets. Futures especially, you want to shop for everything. Every half point counts. But futures especially, you need to shop because there's a wide range. Now, the second concept is that futures typically have a ton of vigorish, juice, commission, whatever you want to call it. It's the cost of making the bet that the bookie charges. And the higher the vigorish, the more you've got to overcome to actually beat the sport. And wise guys are very conscious of finding the lowest vig possible. And it's like the rake in poker. The more they rake, the tougher it is to beat it. And typically, future bets are up to 40% of vig. Now, a typical 11 to 10 bet is less than 5%. So a future bet is like 8 times as much vigorish. And it's really hard to overcome that. And one of the takeaways is that typically futures are a very square bet. It's something that tourists from Ohio, where I'm from, let's say, come play 20 bucks on the Buckeyes, and they get to show their ticket to their buddies, but really they're getting charged a hefty price for that bet. And typically wise guys don't focus on futures unless they think the odds are way off. And that's rare, but that's more often at the very front, right after the odds are released, before they're touched up by the other wise guys. So if you're looking to play futures seriously, one of the more viable times to do that is right after the odds are put out. Now, another way to bet Favre and the Vikings is the season win totals. You can say, okay, the Vikings are expected to win 10 games this year. Do I think they're going to win more or less? If you think less, you actually have to lay more juice. It's about minus 140 on the under. So they're thinking they're going to win 10 games, but probably less likely to win 11, and it's a little more likely they're going to win 9. All right, so do you like the over? Do you like the under? In that case, you're only laying usually 20 cents or maybe 30 cents. So with the minus 140, if you want to play the over, you can take back 120, plus 120, or even plus 110 when there's a 30-cent line, which is a little bit more clearly than the 11 to 10 line, which is a 20-cent line that you do on normal point spread bets, but still that 30-cent line is about 7%, let's say, vig, which is still much, much less than the 40% vig. And the 40% vig is like we said, 8 times as much as the 11 to 10, and it's very hard to beat. Okay, another fun bet, you can bet 18 to 1 against or on Favre winning the NFL MVP. So you bet 100, you win 1,800. This is another fun bet, not a lot of value because, again, the vig is so high on any bet, typically, unless there's a yes-no. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, can you bet Favre not to win the MVP? If so, now they've got to show you what the vig is. So let's say you get back 18 to 1 if he actually wins the MVP, but you got to lay, let's say, 22 to 1 if you want to say no. Now you understand the vig is the difference between 22 and 18. With typical futures, they don't give you any no choice. Thus, you really don't know what the vig is unless you do the math, and having done the math, it's often up to 40%. Now, you can get certain sports books that are low vig shops, as they call them, and in those, sometimes in futures, it's as little as 15%. which is still a lot more than the normal 11 to 10, but a lot less than 40. So if you want a list of the best sports books, you can go to pregameaction.com and check them out, and they got a list of trusted books there. Okay, last concept, and this is a key one and a good one. Why didn't the odds on Favre move and the Vikings more after this recent official announcement? Because literally in many books, the odds stayed exactly the same. It was, let's say, at Pinnacle, for example, they were 14 to 1, and they're still 14 to 1. The odds didn't move at all. Well, the only answer to that is Las Vegas assumed the Favre was going to play and was making the price according to that assumption. And the real value would have been if you thought he wasn't going to play, well, you could have went against the Vikings. Though really, again, with futures, it's hard to go against. You could have went under the season win totals, though, if you wanted to fade the idea that Favre was going to play. You didn't think he was going to play. Now, it's interesting that when Favre actually announced, or there was the rumor that he wasn't going to play and everyone took it seriously, is the odds went to 20 to 1 on the Vikings. So when the assumption was that he wasn't going to play, the odds were 20 to 1 to win the Super Bowl. When the assumption that he was going to play, now it's not only an assumption, he's made the announcement, it's gone down to 10 to 1. So really, it's interesting to note Favre is worth he doubles the chances of the Vikings winning the Super Bowl because you're only getting half as much payout, about 10 to 1, as you would have a 20 to 1 when it was thought that he wasn't going to play. But it's interesting, if you want to dig a little deeper mathematically, is the odds did go down just a little bit in many spots, like from 12 to 1 to 11 to 1, or 11 to 1 to 10 to 1. They went down like 1 unit, from 11 to 10 or whatever. And that really makes a lot of sense, because if you assume the difference between Favre playing and not playing was worth 10 units, and that's what we saw from 10 to 1 to 20 to 1, and you assume that the odds of him playing were about 90%, which is what they were if you went to other prediction markets which are out there. The Favre odds were about 90% this week prior to his announcement. Then you would say the difference is 10. The odds of him not playing were only 10. The difference is 10 units. The odds of him not playing was only 10%. So 10% of 10 units was 1 unit, which means the uncertainty of Favre prior to his announcement probably gave those backing Minnesota an extra unit or so. So they were getting, let's say, 11 to 1. Once the announcement was made, it went down to 10 to 1, just a slight adjustment. And that's a good lesson on how you handicap an uncertain event that's going to affect another event. So Favre playing or not was an event that was uncertain, and it was going to affect another event, which was Minnesota's chance to win the Super Bowl or win games this year. And so what you do is you say, what's the effect of the uncertain event? What's the odds of that event happening? And then you can apply the odds accordingly. So let's say, for example, that New England had Tom Brady uncertain if he was going to play or not. But let's say the odds were 90% he was going to play. That was your estimate as a handicapper. Now let's say if he was going to play, the Patriots in this case were going to lay 10 points. If he doesn't play, they were going to lay 0. Let's say pick 'em. Now, so there's a 10-point difference in the event, and the odds are 90% he's going to play, which means the uncertainty of him playing is worth 1 point, which means the typical line would be 9 when there was still uncertainty. It should be 10 if you know he's going to play, but you don't know that. Thus, it's 9 to account for the uncertainty. And that's an interesting concept, a little bit deep, but if you want to continue talking about it, go to pregameforums.com and we'll have a conversation. And I'll be back with another webcam cast soon. Talk to you then.